The Legend of Zelda for the NES was the very first Zelda game ever released. The story is about a boy named Link, who becomes the hero throughout the series. It came out as early as 1986 for the Famicom in Japan, and was later re-released in the Western world, including Europe and the US, in 1987. The game was a huge hit for Nintendo, and became a real classic. However, there is also a prototype version, and there are quite a number of differences between this version and the one that they released. And today we're going to take a look at what they changed. Let's first look at some of the changes they made to the enemies in the game, since some things are a bit weird. For example, Armos Knights take much longer to come alive in the prototype. The waiting time was reduced from 128 frames to 60 frames, and a cloud of smoke is visible when it's awakened. The waiting time was probably way too long, and players would have easily passed it by that time. The game ran at 60 frames per second, so the 2-second wait time was probably enough to get out of harm's way. But in 1 second, this wouldn't have worked out as well, and so they changed it to make them more dangerous. They also changed some HP values of certain enemies, like the Moldorm, who has 1 HP per segment in the prototype, but 2 in the final. Likewise, the Blue Wizrobe got its health buffed from 8 HP to 10 HP. Such small changes are often done after testing. But that's not all, since they made the Wizrobes even stronger. Both Wizrobe beams do less damage in the prototype. The blue Wizrobe beams went from 1 heart to 2 hearts of damage, and the orange Wizrobe from 2 to 4. So clearly, these enemies were just way too weak, both in the damage department as well as health. And so they got a huge upgrade in both after testing.
Now, rupee drops from enemies also worked a little different in the prototype. There is a variable that tracks how many monsters you've killed without getting damaged. When hit, this value is set to 0 again, but once the variable reaches a certain value and an enemy is killed, a blue rupee will drop and the variable is set back to 0. So this is essentially a system that rewards you for killing enemies efficiently, and while this is in the final game, it's a bit different there. In the released version, the variable caps at 10, but in the prototype, the variable stops at 6. This makes it easier to accumulate a lot of rupees. And that's most likely the reason they changed this, since the player would just drown in rupees and so they had to fix it. Now, one of the most famous quotes from the game was also completely changed, the famous "It's a secret to everybody" line. In the prototype, the Moblin had a different line of text, translating to "I'll give you this, so leave me alone." So essentially a bribe. And we think that this one wouldn't have become as popular as the line they put in the game. So great move, Nintendo. Now, there are also some enemies in the prototype version that aren't seen in the final cut, which is a little weird. For example, the red and blue bubbles. Several things from the second quest do not exist yet in the prototype, as second quest was still under construction. This is also the case with the blue bubbles and red bubbles, which are present in the prototypes of the main game, but got moved to second quest in the final game. They were probably left out of the main game due to balance issues, as they acted just like normal bubbles, but were originally split into 2 different types, one that jinxes Link, and another one that lifts the curse. Instead, Nintendo combined the 2 bubbles into one for the main quest to lower the difficulty for the player. So after going through all the effort of animating the sprite and implementing the jinx mechanic on both bubbles, they probably noticed that they ran into balancing issues, so they just moved it to second quest as difficulty was not a factor there. Now, there is also one enemy that changed a bit in the final cut, however, the old version was seen almost everywhere. The genie looks angrier in the prototype and has 2 spectral legs instead of a tail. Or at least that's what the cutting room floor says, but the genies we found wouldn't have 2 legs at all. However, this prototype sprite can also be seen in both the Japanese and American manual of the game, but that's not all. The lower half of this earlier design even made its way into the Japanese strategy guide, but this design was never used in the game.
Now to finish this video off, we will look at one of the most important things in the Zelda games, sound. Because here, some things were changed as well, and it's quite drastic. First up, all items in the prototype besides rupees use the same sound effect, this one. And in the final game, this is the sound for picking up hearts. Not sure if this is an upgrade. Now there's also another little change when it comes to rewards. The secret discovery chime is heard when you push the blocks that open the shutters inside the dungeons. This was removed in the final version, but reinstated in the cartridge version. So this one is a bit odd. Maybe it would lose its impact? But why is it on the cartridge version then? A bit confusing. Now besides that, there's also a lot wrong with the music in the prototype. For example, the title, dungeon and ending tracks are not yet in the game. And because of this, all the dungeons used the level 9 dungeon track. Clearly, the music was put in late. Well, the bulk of it at least. But still, the first Legend of Zelda remains a classic that ended up creating a legacy in the years after. Thanks for watching everybody, I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to click on any other videos that look interesting to you. And hey, why not subscribe? Because way more videos are coming!